Yes, you're right. The new Triumph Speed 400 is nothing like the Royal Enfield Classic 350. But that doesn't change the fact that this motorcycle was born to battle with Royal Enfield, and that's the main reason why Bajaj priced it so shockingly low. Now, despite the fact that the Speed 400 costs almost the same as a Classic 350, in reality, it's a much closer match to the Royal Enfield Hunter 350, and that's why we have that bike here as well today. This video effectively is aimed at all those tens of thousands of potential Royal Enfield customers that Bajaj wishes to steal away. So for today, why don't we try ignoring the spec sheets for a bit and discuss what the riding experience is like. While Royal Enfield is the clear target for Bajaj with the new Triumph Speed 400, there are a few other potential rivals like the Honda CB350s and the Jawas and ESDs as well. However, those bikes simply haven't been able to match the Royal Enfields, not just in sales figures but also in our previous comparison reviews. For now, the story is all about whether Triumph can tempt buyers away from Royal Enfield. To do that, the riding experience is far more important than the spec sheet, but it's still something to consider, and in that respect, it's a complete knockout for the Triumph. With its 6-speed, 4-valve, liquid-cooled engine, the Speed 400 makes exactly double the power of the Royal Enfields, and it produces more torque as well, although the Triumph's peak torque is produced much higher in the rev range. But it's only when you actually ride the bikes that you will realize that while the Triumph is way faster, the engines on the Enfields feel a whole lot more special. In fact, these motors are part of the reason why you'd even want to buy a new age Royal Enfield 350 in the first place. On the new generation Classic, the motor still has that slow revving nature with a clearly felt thump, especially at low revs. Unlike the old Royal Enfields, this never translates to vibration and harshness, even at high speeds, and the company has done an amazing job with balancing feel and refinement. The Hunter's engine is very similar to the Classic on paper, but RE has given this motor a slightly more responsive nature. It doesn't feel as lazy as the Classic's engine, and that is a better match for the Hunter's more modern feeling chassis. Both the Classic and Hunter feel fantastic at an 80 kph cruise, and both can hold just about a steady 100 without feeling stressed. Anything above that though is slow progress, with the top speed being around 120 kph. In comparison, the Triumph can show you as high as 170 kph on its analog speedometer. The Triumph really won't leave you with lasting memories of its sound or engine feel, but you will never stop being impressed by the performance this engine has to offer. Think of near KTM levels of speed, but with less than half the effort required. In fact, this superbly strong mid-range, along with a light and agile chassis, makes the Speed 400 a beautifully easy bike to ride, even in our crowded and chaotic environment. The Speed 400 certainly lacks the absolute bottom-end performance of the Royal Enfield motors, but it's still a very easy and peaceful bike to ride at low speeds. In fact, with its additional 6th gear, that tractable engine, and the relatively shorter gearing, the Triumph can hold 1 or even 2 gears higher than the Enfields at any given speed. It also has a noticeably lighter clutch, and while you will feel a little more warmth coming off the engine, there is no uncomfortable heat even in jam traffic, well, at least in this monsoon weather. In fact, of all the performance-oriented 350 to 500cc bikes on sale in India, the Triumph is probably the easiest and nicest to ride in our conditions. The only thing that favors the heavier REs in the city is that they have a tighter turning radius. What's also worth pointing out is that any RE owner considering a shift to the Triumph should prepare themselves for a new world of performance. Take a look at these numbers. While the Classic's engine definitely is a special thing, the whole experience is elevated by how you sit on the bike. This is a larger, wider, heavier, more substantial feeling motorcycle, and its commanding king of the road riding position only adds to the riding experience and makes it quite unique in the Indian space. With its retro instrument area and that hooded headlamp, the Classic has perhaps one of the most iconic rider's point of views in the motorcycling world, and that only adds to the special feeling. In comparison, the Hunter is at the other end of the spectrum. Larger riders will fit on this bike, but it is the smallest feeling motorcycle here in terms of both width and height. This can be a good or bad thing depending on your needs. For example, shorter folks will enjoy the fact that it has the lowest and most friendly seat height here, but larger riders will probably want a bike that feels bigger than this. The Triumph finds the middle ground. It certainly feels bigger than the Hunter, but it's not a large bike in general. And while it only weighs 5 kilos less than the Hunter, it actually feels a whole lot lighter on the move. As for pillion comfort, the Classic is definitely the best, with the Triumph coming in second. Suspension-wise, the Classic has that typical soft and plush feel that you would expect, while the Triumph has a surprisingly absorptive and composed suspension setup that deals with our bad roads very well. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for the Hunter. I love the idea that Royal Enfield is making new and more modern motorcycles like the Hunter 350, and I'm really excited about what new products lie in store. But even if you keep a very open mind about what a Royal Enfield motorcycle can be, I think it's fair to expect that it must be comfortable. And that's one aspect where the Hunter lets itself down, because the suspension, especially at the rear, is too firm for this bike's own good. The result is a stiff and jittery ride on anything but smooth and well-made roads. On the upside, this is a sweet handling bike with a surprisingly sharp and reactive front end, but it's still no match for the Triumph, which gives you more confidence, more capability, and more speed. As for the Classic, it has no interest in silly things like attacking corners, but it will put up with it if the rider is rude enough to insist. In that sense, the Classic's chassis composure and braking capabilities mark a huge improvement over the previous bike, and it never feels nervous or unwilling. Handling and dynamics are all well and good, but one of the big reasons that people buy bikes like this is for the way they look and the feel-good factor associated with that. The Royal Enfield Classic 350 is a legend, and we really don't need to go into detail about what makes this such a loved design. What we will say though is that it's nicely put together with appealing quality all around, and it has a solid, almost unbreakable feel. The Classic is available in multiple color options, and you can even have it with alloy wheels if you want the peace of mind of tubeless tires. The Hunter is also a handsome bike with a nice stance and a pretty unique looking rear end. However, next to the Classic and especially the Triumph, the Hunter feels more simple and built to a cost, which it is. Crucially though, the Hunter never feels cheap. But neither of these bikes can match the sheer quality and attention to detail lavished over the new Triumph Speed 400. The Triumph also packs in features like traction control, LED lighting and an immobilizer, which further adds to the value quotient. It is a good-looking bike, but even if you don't love the design, you cannot discount the Speed 400's sheer feel-good factor. And that element of pride of ownership is a very important thing when you're trying to make a bike that will tempt people away from Royal Enfield showrooms. Speaking of, the new age REs have proven their reliability, and they have a huge after-sales network. That is one area where Triumph still has to prove itself. So how do we sum this up without stating too much of the obvious? First of all, I think it's important to point out that while the Triumph will undoubtedly grow the premium motorcycling space in India, I'm not sure how much of a direct, dangerous threat it is to Royal Enfield. The Classic 350, for example, has its own set of loyal customers, and I don't know how many of them will want to migrate to a bike like this. The Hunter, on the other hand, well, that's a lot more closely matched, but Royal Enfield has been very smart with the pricing. And it's so much more affordable than the Triumph that many of those potential buyers may not be able to meet this bike's budget. The Hunter's fabulous pricing is what has led it to become Royal Enfield's second bestseller after the Classic. But it goes without saying that if you can make the stretch, the Triumph is a much nicer bike than the Hunter, and it's easily worth the extra money. In fact, it's so far ahead that you'd be tempted to compare it with the KTM 390 Duke, although that's a different story for another day and one that we will be bringing you very soon. As for the Classic though, that's where things get a little more complicated. I mean, obviously, if you want performance, there is no question here, but there are some finer details to consider. For example, if you're the sort of rider who likes to take life on at a more gentle pace, there is no motorcycle in the Indian space that is more enjoyable at that than the Classic 350. My fondness for this bike only grows with time, and it has an uncanny ability to make even the most dull daily commute an experience to look forward to. On the other hand, the Triumph proves to be immensely impressive in how it combines style, quality, performance, and amazing value for money. If you're looking for that do-it-all, performance-oriented bike that's also very easy to live with, this is now the gold standard in the Indian market. Ultimately, picking between these two bikes comes down to you being honest with yourself about what kind of rider you are. Depending on what sort of riding experience you're after, either one of these two will make you very happy. As for me, it's my job to pick one, and since it comes down to that, it'll have to be the Triumph, because it really is that good. Oh, Roshni is going with her shoes.
She went there also with her shoes.
That's some commitment.
This is IP68, no?
The shoes? The phone. The phone. Let's not find out. My boots are IP68. Are you wanted the patthar throwing also, no? It's got to be the Triumph, because it really is that good. That's weird.